Welcome to the STARTS4Water vlog. My name is Anne Nichten. I'm your anchor woman. In this series, we'll have conversations with artists who are currently working as artists in residence at the STARTS Partner Institutes. I would like to welcome our guest today, Joshua Stein from the United States, who is doing his residency at the Cittadelarte Fondazione Pistoletto and UniD residency program in Biella in Italy, and Ianira Vassallo, assistant professor at the Polytechnic University in Torino in Italy. Welcome to you both. Joshua, I would like to start with you, and maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us in short about the project that you are developing in your residency in Italy.
Thank you. So I am I'm working with the Fondazione Pistoletto mostly on a watershed and a river that runs immediately adjacent to their campus. So I think it feels close to the heart of everybody there, number one. It feels very proximate and very immediate. It also is a river that flooded in 2020 and caused significant damage to the campus. So I think it feels like a very pressing issue. And maybe I can share my screen and just show you some of the visuals that I've been working with, both before I arrived in Biella, and then also what I have discovered since arriving in Biella. So this is the larger Po Valley watershed, which spreads across most of northern Italy. And this is some of the old industrial areas that are located adjacent to that river in Biella. Biella being one of the major centers of the textile industry in northern Italy. And so there are all these incredible ex-industrial buildings, former wool textile mills that exist along that river. And I was interested in trying to understand the relationship between the town of Biella and then some of the mountain sources of the streams above the city, and also where the river arrived downstream, which is more in the rice-producing plains of a town called Vercelli. So this was a simple schematic diagram of the watershed for the main river, the Cervo, which runs right next to the Fondazione Pistoletto, and then the areas around that, both upstream and downstream. And I was imagining trying to understand what that connection was like in terms of sediment that would bridge together cultural monuments upstream with rice-producing areas downstream. And I think there's something very powerful and simple about the diagram of a river coming from the mountains and moving into the foothills and then into the plains. But what I have slowly discovered is that if this is the system of natural waterways in that region, these are the artificial waterways. So it's all of a sudden been, that simple diagram has been complicated drastically. And zooming in, this is now looking at the rice field areas below Biella. We can see even a much more dense system of irrigation, which is quite incredible. At a certain point, it doesn't look like natural patterns of waterways anymore. So I'm interested that this particular morphology now starts to look more like freeway systems and less like rivers as we know them. I started by going up to the mountains and trying to trace this the stream backwards and upwards. And in the mountains, there also is not only the source of the stream, but also a UNESCO designated monument. And I'm interested in the way that all of the historical structures here are slowly eroding over time. So we can see just piles of material. We can see that the structures themselves, as one might guess, are deteriorating. And so I'm hoping to use technology, in particular LiDAR scans, to somehow capture the ephemeral nature of buildings that have been around for several hundred years, but still understanding that these buildings are materially changing, they're moving. And one of the things I like about this technology is that it confuses anthropogenic structures like architecture and landscape. But these are some of the examples of just the tectonics that I discovered, that once you look closely, you see that they're very obviously not only aging, but heading elsewhere. They're moving to other parts of the region via the waterways. So I was also doing scans of some of the infrastructure of varying ages around that particular waterway, including some of the detritus, the rubbish that is tossed into that waterway, and then the industry in town. So this is one of the important textile mills that is now abandoned. And you can see in this LiDAR scan the relationship between the natural waterways as well as the architecture. And then wow. This is a LiDAR scan that shows exactly the same view, let's say the same scene, but from the perspective of rubbish that is tossed into that waterway.
Ianira, can you introduce yourself and your work in a nutshell, and how your work relates to Joshua's project, please?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Hannah. I'm very glad to be here today, and I'm also happy to meet you again, Joshua. Me and Joshua just meet by screen twice, so I'm glad to see you again. My name is Ianira Vassallo. I'm an architect, and I have a PhD in spatial planning and public policy from the University UF of Venice. And from 2018, I'm an assistant professor in urbanism of the University Department of Regional and Urban Studies and Planning at Politecnico di Torino. My research interests focus on the relationship between informal and collaborative practices and the institutional project of spatial transformation in the contemporary cities. Since 2016, I'm an active member and collaborator of Lapsus NGO. And what is Lapsus? Lapsus is the acronym of Subsidiarity Laboratory. The idea of this organization is to support and facilitate an horizontal relationship on an equal footing between public institution and active citizen. With active citizen means also NGO, collectives, professional. And in this context, I work in particular on the production of discourses, spaces, knowledge, and values related to the urban common processes. In 2020, on this topic about urban commons and common goods. I carry out a teaching and a research experience at the Institut d'Urbanisme et de Géographie Alpine de Grenoble. Currently, I work in the research project named Lifelines. And the focus of this research is the possibility to analyze the new infrastructure. And with the name infrastructure, I mean social infrastructure, cultural infrastructure of care, of work and of production that the COVID situation are defining. So how my research interests, my skills are related to Joshua's work. If it's possible, I show you a picture. This is not my picture, it's a picture that is created from the Paola Vigano and Bernardo Secchi Architectural Studio for a competition. The name of this competition is Grand Paris. This competition is very famous, and the idea is to create a new vision of the cities of Paris. This picture has a special meaning for me, and I think that could be a good input to analyze the relationship between the two work, the two way to define our work, me and Joshua, because it's a vision. Is the idea to redefine the identity of a territory, not just with a view related to ambient solution, to social impact, to cultural engagement of this place, or the orographical definition of a territory, but the idea is to create a new vision, a new perspective. And I think that when I talked with Joshua, my interest in his work is related to an idea to create a new vision of a territory. The idea to research specific elements that are not visible to all, to put in evidence this element and to define that like a new infrastructure of the territory. So to show the density of the territory, and not only like we see the element that we know that define this territory, but new element, and put them in evidence to define a new infrastructure of this territory, a new vision, a new perspective. And I think that in a territory like Biella, this idea is very interesting. It's crucial because it's a territory that have a long history, and also a lot of is characterized by a lot of elements related to the productive infrastructure, and but also about the work of Fondazione Pistoletto, and also from the history of the housing in how we live in a place like Biella and a Valle Cervo. But the idea of Joshua is to recreate a new images of this place with new element. And I think that it's the original part of this work. And I think that in a certain way, it's a connection between two skills that are very different. Also for me, the idea is not just the project of the space, it's the project of coexistation. So the idea to put in evidence element, also human element and animal element that are not connected before. So I think that could be a suggestion of our connection.
I have a question for you. When listening to both of your very intriguing explanations about your work and the connection, it also occurred to me that you somehow seem to include the role of humans and interventions in our notions of diagrams on cultural heritage. Is that far-fetched, or does that make sense, that you're both trying to expand this whole notion of cultural heritage with the role of human beings in a sense?
I mean, for me, I would say absolutely. In some ways, that's really the start of the project, is to say that the role of, let's say, the dichotomy between humans and nature is something that we have lost, not just in the post-war era, but a century or two before that, it has been increasingly confused. And so to admit that, and then to try to figure out how to move forward from that, is, I think, a starting point for this project, from my perspective.
Ianira, can you reflect on that?
Yes. Before I talk about the common good, and this idea is very related to the role of human being and the idea of the new relationship between human and nature, human and natural space. I think that the future of the project of territorial project is a project of coexistation, and with coexistation it means not that it's a project that talk about conflict and also space of connection, because I think that the relationship between the natural elements and human is not also related to climate change, for example. It's not a very simple relationship, but sometimes it's a conflict relationship. And so this project admits this situation. But the idea is not to relate a hierarchy between nature and human, but to start to a horizontal relationship between these two elements. So the idea is that there are the space for the mixing of two parts, the space of the conflict, or the space that are related also only to the nature, and space related only to human. So I think that it's a complex relationship. So the project have to be very open to this way, to this topic. This is my point of view.
I read about the Piemontese regional challenge. How does that fit in to this whole notion of human and nature, Ianira? Can you maybe explain us what this challenge is?
Yes, when we found that Epistolate talk and think about this challenges, that it's a social challenges, the idea is that to start to think about the river like a social infrastructure, not only like a productive infrastructure, because you know that in Biella, some decade ago, the river is an important element for the production. And so the industries are very related to this place, but now we have to change this way to see the river, because in the mind of the people, the river is also a resource for the production, not a resource for people. So the idea of this social challenge is try to redefine the role and also the relationship between people, citizen, and river, with the idea that river is also a place where we can meet, we can stay together, and not only with the nature, with a different way and idea of nature, because in this place also the climate change the idea of a river. The river is a resource for production, but also an element, a conflictual element, because we have a lot of problem with that. So the idea is to reconnect the people that live in this place with the river, and try to design, to define it, right, a natural infrastructure that connect different monuments, different aspects of this territory, but also the people with that.
And Joshua, I understood that you also collected local knowledge, and you went out to also discover this relation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, when I first landed, I think maybe on my first or second day in Biella, I was able to meet with somebody who's like a specialist in gold panning, which is I think I had never met a real live gold panner before, and I think that was important. Number one, because we went to go visit an ancient Roman, we could say a gold mine, but it was not a mine in the way that we typically think about it, which is just a hole in the ground. This was an entire landscape. I think it's about 9 kilometers long that had been shaped by the Romans effectively to change the course of water as it would run over this landscape and make it easier to extract gold from the landscape. So it's again a reminder that this ability of humans to literally change the geology of the planet, dates back a couple thousand years. It's not new. Certainly, the scale of the impact has changed radically very recently, but that was something that felt incredibly specific and local, while at the same time exposing larger planetary truths, let's say, or tendencies at this moment.
Wow.
Just one example. I think I've met plenty of other people who had maybe a similar window from something that starts as a specific or a local, not even a research, but more of a passion that really speaks to larger global issues.
Love your idea to take in consideration the identity of the space, also related to the knowledge of people that live there, and the idea of mix these competencies with the big data, the data of the territory, the GIS data. So the idea of a very realistic analysis of the territory, and at the same time create a new layout with the knowledge of the territory. So it's a very interesting point of view in this sense.
And talking about this interest, I'm wondering if you can explain us, Ianira, what you learned from having these conversations and being involved as an expert with Joshua's work. What did his residency bring you?
This element of mix of human knowledge and real data that describe the territory as the element that I never said before. So for me, it's very interesting, because when I talked with Joshua, it was very interesting to how he can find the data, the GIS data for the analysis and for the description of this territory. But at the same time, he worked with the local people. So it's not only a work related to a geographical point of view from a territorial analysis, but also to take in consideration the territory like a dense element. So the social the social dimension is very related to the territorial dimension, and it's the mix of the different things, also cultural dimension, that create the images of the territory, of the space.
Thank you. And Joshua, can you react on this and also explain maybe what your holistic view learned from Ianira's work fields or research?
The reliance on the GIS data for me is a really important part of the project. For me, what it helps me do is, it's an aggregator. It collects information from all different sources, some of which I understand and some of which I don't, right? Like some of these sources are just from disciplines that I'm not trained in. And I think that there's something beautiful about that I have access to that information, even though I'm not trained in that particular aspect of knowledge. Of course, I still need help deciphering that information, right? It's one thing to have access to it, and it's another thing to understand it. And I've been, slowly finding the right people who can help me make sense of an overabundance of information, right? There's too much information for one person to process. But I think the beautiful thing is that you can find the people who can guide you through. They can almost be like a trail guide up this mountain of information. Ianira could point me to many different data sources. She could give me the web link, but then she could also explain something larger, which would take a long time for me to perceive coming as an outsider, which was about the larger trends of the way that inhabitation has slowly been changing in the mountainous areas versus the more urbanized areas in the plains. And that is something that maybe I could read a paper on, and I'm sure I could find the data on it, but to just have the explanation in a conversation makes it more tangible somehow. Obviously, I was also able to visit all of these areas, but some of these trends you can't see visually that easily. It's much more helpful to have somebody just relate the story to you. So it was very helpful that Ianira and other experts like Ianira are able to give me both aspects of that story. They can point me to the data source, but that they can also just, tell me a story. Sometimes
Lovely.
Stories are helpful.
Cool. And a question to both of you. What would your takeaway be for our audience, for students or for educators, based on your experience in this residency so far?
For me, the most powerful thing about this residency in general, but it has also been very true specifically with my host institution in Biella, is that to think through problems of this scale, it's not an artist who's doing it, right? Like it's a team, and it's a network of interested parties. And I think that I feel fortunate that my host institution has been incredibly good at finding the right experts to speak to, and that expertise is across a number of different perspectives. There's scientific expertise, but then as the residency has been set up, there's local expertise, which is a different type of science, right? And I think that that's very important to try to be working across all of those different domains and perspectives. And I think more and more artists have been finding themselves in this role, not being sole geniuses locked away in a studio somewhere, but somebody who's really a part of a larger team of experts. And the artistic perspective is just one perspective to bring to this debate, this dialogue.
Fantastic. So I would like to thank you both for this beautiful conversation, and I would like to encourage people to have a look at our other editions of the STARTS4Water vlog in the same channel. And if you are passing by in Italy, Please visit the installation from July 1st onwards. And thanks again and enjoy your day.